first game.
At this point, 5 days from now, you'll be watching the intro to College Game Day in Dublin, Ireland.
And high school football's already been picking up and stuff. So, like, it feels like Friday, I was covering a high school game, and I had that feeling. I'm like, oh, my gosh, football is finally back, and I'm so happy. And college football's going to be right around the corner. And then NFL starts in, 3 weeks? I mean,
yeah, so 5 days after the first college football Saturday.
Yeah, so
NFL starts.
Yeah, we're right around the corner, man. We could taste it, and it's going to taste real good once it gets here.
By the way, how hot was it at your first high school football game?
Dude, I was sweating so bad. So I covered 2 games on Friday. It was a jamboree, so 3 games were going on for scrimmages, and they were about a half each. First one started at 7 o'clock, which I was covering, and the sun was just beating down, and then the second one wasn't until 9. I'm already drenched or whatever. And then, of course, the rain just really starts coming down, and it's like going sideways and stuff. And so I get wet from that. So, I mean, it cancels out. But it was a weird weather day.
When I used to do high school football back in college, because we broadcasted for the team that was right down the street from us, Clark Central, and their press box faced the sun. Like, it was in the sun, and it didn't. Man. The sun would set behind the opposing bleachers. But for the first, especially in those August and September games, for the first half, you had dead sunlight on you the entire time. And we had an open box. There was no air conditioning. So what I would do is I'd go home after class that day. I'd turn my AC down really, really low and just, get super cold because I knew I was going to have to endure unbearable heat for at least 2 hours that night. It worked, but definitely not the most pleasant conditions by any means. But that's high school football in the South.
No, it definitely is. Did you, speaking of press boxes and stuff, I don't know if you saw Chapin High School right nearby here. They got a whole new press box and stuff. It's
really?
2 stories. Insane, closed in. I don't know what it looks like inside, but I can imagine it's a lot better. It probably has air conditioning for one. These high schools, man.
Some of these high schools have better facilities than a lot of colleges.
Go to a state like Texas where so many schools are like this.
Allen, where Kyler Murray played, it looks better than most Group of 5 stadiums across college football.
That's the thing, man. So many of these high schools are getting up to that IMG type of level when it comes to football. It's nuts to think about.
Yeah, that's insane. But high school football is back. Again, college football returns in just a couple of days. And, of course, fall camp's still rolling on for South Carolina as, again, we're 12 days away from Carolina and Old Dominion squaring off at Williams-Brice Stadium. And, of course, on Saturday, we had yet another scrimmage as we're hopefully trying to figure out a little bit more about what this team's going to be. Still no depth chart. Still don't know exactly who's starting at what spots. But we're beginning to hopefully kind of learn who's emerging within their respective position groups. And let's go, Ed, cut number 4 here to start things off here. This is Coach Beamer on Saturday after the scrimmage, talking about if there are any significant jumps from scrimmage 1 to scrimmage 2.
Not really. Like I said, I was pleased with the way we kicked the ball for the most part. I know I said last week that Kai was putting the crap out of the ball, and he continues to. And then Alex is doing a nice job, or did a nice job. And then William Joyce, I believe, got in there and kicked some. Mason Love got in there and kicked some. So I feel like we've gotten better there. And we really wanted to come in today, Alan, and be able to throw and catch a little bit. We coming into today, if you say, okay, we kind of know who our top couple running backs are, let's get these other guys some carries and see what they can do. And then we said, let's really kind of figure out what our receivers can do. So let's throw and catch the ball a little bit more than maybe we did last week. And thought some receivers flashed today and did some good things. And overall, and I told the team this last night, we got better as a team this week. There's no question in my mind from last Saturday when I talked to you guys after this preseason game to today. We really got better in practice this week and feel like everybody made strides and still have a long ways to go, don't get me wrong, but like the progress that we made this week.
Okay, so a couple things there. I'll start off with kicking because that's something that we talked about last week that was starting to concern me a little bit, especially given the fact that he was so negative about it and blunt about it, which is not typically what Coach Beamer does. So it sounds like this session went better. I will say he did say Mason Love was kicking too, which I said last week. If he starts getting into this competition, that raises a red flag for me because that means the other two guys aren't doing all that great. So we'll see what happens, but I'm still a little on pins and needles when it comes to kicking because I don't love what I'm hearing up to this point.
No, I don't either. I'm not very confident in what South Carolina's got going on kicker-wise. I mean, there's a reason why Alex Herrera and William Joyce haven't kicked in games probably up to this point. I mean, it's not a knock on them. It's just they're guys that are significantly better than them. Mitch Jeter, Parker White. I mean, South Carolina fans have been spoiled with good kicking over the years, and it goes way back further than that. But I would say with Mason Love, I think it's an interesting thing because he was the special teams focus of this year's recruiting class, and he seems like a good prospect. I think he was a 3-star, maybe coming out of high school. So they've spoken very highly of him and what he can do. So I mean, if it comes down to it, and he's the best kicker for the job, by all means, start him. But obviously, you'd like to preserve his red shirt if you can. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see South Carolina in situations this year where they're going with Joyce or Herrera just to preserve a red shirt, and then they come back and bite them in the butt. If you're avoiding using Love because he's the best guy for the job, but you also want to preserve his red shirt, I get it. But you gotta do it. You gotta play the good freshman. It goes for all positions.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's still a battle that seems to be coming down to the very end that we may not know until we get to next week leading up to Old Dominion. Of course, the general consensus around the scrimmage 2 on Saturday was the defense is still ahead of the offense. Coach Beamer mentioned a little bit later on that they were rotating about 16 guys on defense. That's mainly guys up front and then a couple different guys at that other cornerback spot as they're trying to figure out who's going to play opposite of O'Donnell Fortune. But by all indications, the defense doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Now, we know the offense is going to be behind a little bit, but how comfortable of a gap do you have to have going into game number 1 where you're not overly concerned about the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, and I think with DB specifically, I did ask Shane how those guys looked out there and if he's come down to any, potential guys in that competition. And again, he gave the smart answer of it's going to be, Emery Floyd, Judge Collier, and Vicari
He
Swin.
just named everybody.
Yeah, but again, to his point, he said that all 3 guys should see good snaps in these early games to start the year. But I think he did point out that Judge really had a good scrimmage. And I think that's the consensus from what Gamecock Central's heard. But as for what was the second part of your question there?
Just about the gap. Like, okay, yeah, we know the defense is going to be ahead of the offense, but how big should that gap be as we enter game number 1 where you feel like, okay, well, the offense is still coming along, but at least they're not like miles behind?
Yeah, and I think to answer your question now, I think the offense seemed to have a better week this week than they did last week. I think last week, Shane spoke about this multiple times in the press conference. They threw everything at these, the receivers, linemen, quarterbacks, everyone on offense, and it's a lot of information to take in for one scrimmage. And he said they really didn't change it up this week. It was much of the same. No, they're not adding anything really new to the fold. And I think the results seemingly were better this week. It seemed like Lenore Sellers played a lot better. You got Rocket Sanders in there, and I'm sure we'll talk about him. Shane Beamer said he looked great, and a lot of other people have said that he looked great too. But I think they're starting to mesh it together. It's not going to be a perfect picture right now because offense takes a lot longer to come together than the defense. But I think as they start figuring out who your starting 5 is going to be, who your quarterback is going to be, who your receivers and tight ends are going to be, and your running backs, I feel like they'll be able to kind of get it together and be ready for week 1.
Is what we've heard from these scrimmages maybe setting our expectations for the defense maybe a little too high to start off with? Because, and again, reading through the notes on the scrimmage, you had T.J. Sanders getting some tackles for losses and sacks. Debo got a sack. They say Martin Scott looked really good. David Busey coming along. Like, everything that you're hearing about the defense is phenomenal. And again, we expect this defense to be better than they were a season ago. But, do we need to come back down to earth a little bit? Because, again, it is scrimmages and it is, inter-squad, and you can only take so much away from those things to where, if they went out there and suddenly gave up 40 points against Kentucky, we be surprised, right?
There's a few ways to go about this. You can look at it from the angle of, okay, the defense is just really that good. Like, no matter who you put in front of them, they're just that good. Or there's the side of it where the defense is just blowing by the offense, and the offense really isn't as good as we think. Maybe we'll find out as the year goes on. And I think we'll have a better answer to that question because it's kind of hard to tell right now without seeing it live in person.
Sure.
But like by week 2, like you said, if the defense gives up like 40 points or something, then maybe they just weren't that good. Or, maybe if South Carolina's offense just gets sacked, like the quarterback gets sacked like 6 times, then it's like, okay, we could see why the defense has been playing so good. It's because this offensive line's not that good. But I do think the offense will be fine this year, and I do expect the defense to be good. I don't know about historical, like Kyle Kennard said they will be, but again, I think they're going to be significantly more improved than last year.
Here's the thing: they don't need to be historical. If you can put yourself in the top half of the SEC, you should be fine. You know what I mean? Because there were so many categories last year where they were dead last or close to dead last. So if you can be marginally better than that, you should be in position to win a fair amount of games, get yourself back to a bowl, which, again, at the end of the day, that is priority number one. Whatever happens past that is gravy. And look, our perception of this team is going to change as the season goes along. Maybe after 3 games where you've played Kentucky and LSU, we think this team is way better than we thought they were going to be, or we think they're way worse than we thought they were going to be. Like that first month is so critical to defining our opinion and what this team's going to be because of how tough that month of October is going to be, where wins are going to be very, very hard to come by.
Yeah, it's hard to predict what this team is going to look like because that first month of the year, like you said, will go a long way in determining what this team ends up being in terms of whether or not they get to a bowl game. I mean, think about it this way. They got 4 games if you include August 31st, 4 games in September. 2 are going to be wins, I think. Akron, Old Dominion should be wins. And then depending on what you do elsewhere, you could be 4-0, you could be 3-1,
right,
or you could be 2-2. I think the general consensus is you'd like to be 4-0 or 3-1. How do you get there? I mean, I think you can go into Lexington and win. I think you can go at home and beat LSU. It's really going to depend on, okay, how is this offense coming along, and is the defense still playing as well as it is? If all that works, then I think they can definitely have a shot going 3-1 or 4-0.
Well, a lot of the success this year is going to ride on who is playing quarterback. We still are officially waiting on the announcement for who QB1 is going to be. Coach Beamer talked about that on Saturday as well after the scrimmage. We'll dive into that coming up. It is the Extra Point. He is Jack Belcher from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head, along with you on your Monday here on The Game. I always love telling you about our friends over at Twin Peaks. We just started talking about week 0 there to lead off the show. And it's time to break out your game day jersey because college football is officially back. You can grab a round of signature 29-degree draft brews and raise them high to the start of college football season with week 0 coming up this Saturday. But, why just wait for the weekend? They're serving scratch food and pouring quality cocktails every day after dark down at Twin Peaks. Come by the lodge and experience the best late nights in the league today, tomorrow, or any other day of the week. And tomorrow, by the way, they have some new food being rolled out on the menu, some spicy chili crisp, also a backyard barbecue brisket, as well as many others. Come by and check them out at Twin Peaks, right down the street from us here in the Vista.
I'm wait a couple days. We'll get in here. Once I leave you guys, I'll go back across the street and watch the tape of everything tonight. I thought both those guys, including Davis Bevel, he did some good stuff today for us and came in and made some nice throws and did some good things. Robbie and Lenoris took the bulk of the reps with the first couple groups and thought they both flashed and did some good things in the run game and the pass game. Particularly, we're not running the quarterback in scrimmage, but some scramble situations where they broke out of there. Thought they showed what a weapon they can be when things do break down. We'll look at the tape and then get into next week and kind of see where we are. But I know we have, more than one quarterback that we can win football games with.
Welcome back in, Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Belcham, Gamecock Central, along with you on your Monday here on the game. That was Coach Beamer on Saturday after the scrimmage, as we still have yet to officially award QB1 to anybody. We think it's going to be Lenore Sellers. We're just waiting on the official confirmation, and this time around, he even threw a third name in there. Davis Bevel even looked good. Look, we've thought this entire offseason this was just a formality, a foregone conclusion. Of course, it's going to be Lenore Sellers' job, and I'm 99.9% sure that it's going to be. But what if it isn't? What if Robbie Ashford has done something enough in these scrimmages in fall camp where he is QB1 in 12 days? Like, just playing devil's advocate, what if that happens?
Oh my gosh. Look, I think Robbie's a good quarterback and all. I think he definitely has shown. It seems like he's shown enough to be the guy. However, saying that, speaking it into potential existence would set a fire in this city. I think everyone wants to see Lenore Sellers be the guy. And if for whatever reason he's not, I think that says a lot about how that battle actually went. Like, it's either Sellers just didn't do well enough,
right,
or Ashford just out competed him.
Yeah. And I think that's what people would go to immediately is what's wrong with Sellers, not necessarily what's great about Robbie Ashford, because I feel like, and again, we've seen an entire season's worth of sample size with Robbie Ashford when he got to start at at Auburn previously, and he even admitted, like, hey, I didn't get the development that I probably needed there. I could have been better if I would have known this, would have done that, or whatever it may be, and hopefully he's making those strides here at South Carolina. But when you look at what Sellers is supposed to be, comes in as a freshman, sits behind, Spencer Rattler, and then he's supposed to take over for the next handful of years to lead Carolina to great heights and then go off to the NFL to be the, top pick in the draft and all that kind of stuff. And that would just completely derail that, I think, in a lot of people's eyes. And again, I think people would focus more on like, oh no, why isn't it Sellers, as opposed to, hey, Robbie Ashford must be really great then if he beat out Sellers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would be rough. But apparently, and Mike Yuva with us at Gamecock Central wrote a good story on what he heard from the scrimmages, and a source had told him that, quote, Sellers looked the best of all the quarterbacks. So I think that's a good sign.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be the guy. I get why they're holding up on announcing this, for one, because, again, Shane Beamer preaches competition more than anything else. But it's also like, why would you want to give away who your quarterback's going to be, 2 weeks before the season starts? I mean, I guess it doesn't really make a difference, because I'm sure Old Dominion's preparing like Sellers is going to be the guy.
Sure.
But then again, I think either way, whatever happens with this quarterback competition, Robbie hinted at last week, they could definitely be in a situation where they use both guys. Like on a fourth down situation, when you need like a yard or two, bring in Robbie Ashford to go get those extra yards.
Maybe, and that's certainly possible. And I think there's also an element of it, too, where, Lenore Sellers is a redshirt freshman quarterback, still relatively young. What is he, 18, 19 years old? And if this were two senior guys, and Robbie Ashford's a redshirt junior, if these were two like upperclassmen type guys battling for this spot, maybe would have already known. But for the sake of just continuing to put pressure on your young quarterback, because he's going to face a lot of it this year.
Oh, yeah.
With the schedule that they have, just playing in the SC in general, they probably feel like that is the best for him development-wise. Like, hey, let's keep the pressure on him, keep the heat on him until the very last minute, and we'll get a depth chart sometime next week probably, which will probably finally have him listed above that. But until then, there's always going to be that little doubt in the back of his mind that, hey, maybe it's not my job yet to keep him going and keep him pushing and all that kind of stuff. So from that standpoint, I get it. I just do think it's almost kind of comical how we've been presenting it as this competition when we know it's not really this entire offseason.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I get why they're putting the pressure on him, because it's like he needs it. Like you said, he's going to face it a ton this season, and getting it right away, having to be in a quote unquote battle that, like, we all know he's probably going to win, but it's like you said, in the back of his mind, it's probably like, hey, like, I still got to go out here and fight for this job and stuff, and nothing's handed to me.
Right.
And I think Beamer made that abundantly clear this offseason with some of the transfer guys not coming in because of that. So I do think Sellers will ultimately win this job. And, how he handles what comes next, I think, is going to be very important. But I feel like he's prepared for it because of the way South Carolina's kind of operated and not giving him everything right away.
Let's get a little bit more when it comes to quarterbacks here. This is Coach Beamer talking after the scrimmage on Saturday about the fact that, well, as you would expect, quarterbacks aren't live most of the time through camp so far, and especially in these scrimmages. Cut number 12 here, Ed.
Yeah, we've seen Robbie on tape do that in games, where he's had, you're talking about the quarterbacks, right? Yeah. So we've seen Robbie do that on tape in games. We've seen Lenoris do it in games out there against Vanderbilt, last year, and in practices where we've made him live. We've done that, not just in in scrimmages we've done that, and then some periods in practice where we've made it live, not this year, but leading into this year. So we got a pretty good idea about that. When you're 240 pounds and run close to 22 miles an hour, you got a pretty good idea of when he gets rolling that he'll be hard to bring down. And the thing for him is all those guys is just continue to develop throwing the ball and everything else that goes into the run game as well.
And again, when you're trying to evaluate every possible angle and data point when it comes to these two quarterbacks that are going to be using their legs, because that's what their skill set is and that's what this offense is going to be predicated against, I don't know what kind of difference that's going to make, but and Sellers did a really good job of explaining this the other week where, hey, if I take off and run and if I'm one-on-one with somebody, I can take them head on. If it's two or more guys, then you're going down, or you're not putting up as much of a fight, for the risk of injury and all that kind of stuff. So when you have these guys in non-contact jerseys, in scrimmages, what ends up being a 3-yard gain or a 15-yard gain can be tough to figure out, because okay, well, he probably would have broken that tackle. We don't know that for sure. Or maybe that defender would have brought him down. You know what I mean? It's small little things, but when you're talking about quarterbacks with these type of skill sets, that is something that is going to be missing when you're talking about this eval.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how whoever's at quarterback and on offense this year, how they handle, like you said, I mean, scrimmages are completely different from games in terms of, okay, you're going live, but you're not going 100% live. If you get what I'm saying, like, you're not, obliterating the quarterback if he's out in space and he's not sliding. You're not trying to get that guy hurt. But I do think, I mean, even Shane was saying it the other day, like, he was looking back at some tape from last year with Spencer Rattler, and there were some runs he had that maybe a guy like Sellers or Ashford this year, if they get those type of plays, they can break and move.
Sure.
And so I think that's where you get the strengths of, okay, if these guys are decent enough in the pocket to where they can be pretty good passers, that's only going to help what they do in the run game. Because, again, I think the run game in general is going to be pretty solid this year and a strong point for this offense. With a guy like Sellers or Ashford, specifically Sellers, if he starts, he's a guy like, I mean, I don't know if you want to go option with him, but it's like if he's got a hole, he can take it and go for a significant amount of yards. So I think they're going to be fine offensively. But, again, we'll have to just see how whoever the quarterback is first off, I think, is the big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll dive back into more of what Beamer had to say a little bit later on. We'll talk a little more general college football coming up next. NCAA.com released their list of the most important weekends in the chase to the college football playoff, first year of the 12-team format. Really quickly, though, want to remind you once again, on Friday. Our Summer Golf Classic is back. Going to be out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Weather is looking amazing. Still have some slots if you want to sign up a foursome. Give Charwood a call at 803-755-2000. Register. Again, 803-755-2000. Register for our Summer Golf Classic. Again, coming up this Friday at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. The biggest weekends in college football this year. Coming up next, Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Monday on the Game as our Talking Hardwood segment brought to you by our friends over at Georgia Pacific. And for today, we're talking schedules, college football, as we are but 5 days away from week 0 getting started and 12 days away from things really kicking in a high gear with a full Saturday slate for week number 1. A lot of very, very compelling weekends this year. And that's something interesting that's happened now that we've realigned these conferences. We've dumped the Pac-12 into the water, and now you have an 18-team Big Ten, a 16-team SEC, a 17-team ACC, and a 16-team Big 12. There are a lot less Saturdays where there's just nothing happening. And for the SEC specifically, there was for so many years like that next to last Saturday of the year that we called Cupcake Saturday because everybody would just play an FCS team or a group of 5 team before taking on their rival the next week. That's gone. Yeah, you still have some of those games mixed in there. South Carolina's going to play Wofford in November, but you don't have a full Saturday of just, the SEC slate really sucks today.
Yeah, it's not like years past where, like you said, usually the week before the final week of the regular season is what you would call like your tune-up week or whatever, your cupcake week, because you are playing a lot of those worse teams. But honestly, I mean, I feel like the SEC teams specifically, they have them kind of spread out across the schedule. Like, I'm sure I think there's probably like random weeks throughout the year where you'll see like South Carolina plays Akron week 4,
right?
And I'm sure there's teams in like October that just play a random, Joe Schmo team. But there is a lot less of like everyone doing it. Now, That said, every week is really, really big. And I think week 1, definitely the marquee week in terms of right off the bat, you got so many great matchups. Rivalry week, week 14, always a good one. Another week I'm looking at as a really good one off this list here, I'd have to say is probably week 7. Because I'll tell you what, man, you're getting Texas, Oklahoma. That's always the big matchup. Mm-hmm. But you're also getting, if these two teams are still where they are, Ole Miss is at LSU. That's a huge matchup. And then you also have a matchup like Ohio State, Oregon, which in my opinion could potentially be the game of the year to watch.
I'm checking the schedule here because I would assume if things hold the way that they typically do, well, I don't know, they probably wouldn't do that. But typically the biggest Big Ten game gets the big noon Saturday kickoff, which is noon on that day. Traditionally, Texas and Oklahoma also play at noon. But this game's at Autzen Stadium. I don't think they would do a 9 a.m. local kick in Oregon just to be big noon Saturday.
No, but here's the thing: is Texas and Oklahoma? They're just going to be on. It's going to be on ABC now, is it not?
It will be on ABC, or it should be. It was last year as well, but yeah, that game traditionally holds the 12 o'clock local start. Let me double check to make sure that's still.
There's no way they would do a 9 a.m. kickoff.
Because that's my thing is like I don't want those games to go head to head. Let's see. Do they have? Oh, actually, correction. Oklahoma and Texas are taking on each other on at 3:30 this year. So it's not a noon local kick.
Okay.
So that is a little bit different from the tradition of what they've done there. But at the same time, that could still be the same time Oregon and Ohio State play. But hopefully, that will be a night game for those two. So you can have Texas and Oklahoma in the afternoon, mid-afternoon, and then you roll into Oregon and Ohio State that night. That would make the most sense to me.
Now here's the solution for the Fox kickoff at noon. I don't like saying it because I don't think they're going to be good this year. Kansas State is at Colorado that week. It is one of the games listed on this article that we're looking at for week 7 as like the marquee matchup to watch that week in week 7. That could be your cop out for Big Ten. I guess. Well, does Big 12? Doesn't Big 12 work with Fox?
I'm pretty sure they still have their deal with Fox.
So I'm guessing if big noon kickoff, that could probably be your game right there.
Quickly, let's see. What could Colorado's schedule be at that point in time? Before then, they'll have played 5 games. North Dakota State in week number 1, at Nebraska, at Colorado State, Baylor, and UCF.
There's a good chance they could be 0-5 by that point. But like, hear me out. I'm not just a Colorado hater. I promise.
Sure.
North Dakota State. No, they have notoriously been a good team for years now.
Yes,
so
yes.
if they're any bit as good as they have been in the past, it's not an easy matchup, and it's a Thursday matchup this season. So that's tough. Going to Lincoln, Nebraska, there's a very good chance that could be College game day that week. I'm not even gonna lie. You want to get Dion on at least once this year for game day. That's your week to do it, and it could be the game like with Texas a few years ago with them. Are they back? This is kind of like Nebraska. Like, they got Dylan Raiola now. They got some good pieces. Matt Rule.
Right.
If they win this game, it's kind of like, hey, like they're kind of, are they back? We don't know. And it's a night game too. Colorado State gave them such big fits last year. Now they get them at their place. I think that could be a tough game. And then Baylor and UCF. I'm not sure. I could see Colorado winning one of those games, but I don't know how it's going to look. KJ Jefferson could be pretty good for UCF. Baylor, who knows what they look like. But Colorado, I think, is in for another tough year. But we'll see.
And again, that Colorado-Kansas State games in week number 7. That is October the 12th, which coincides with Ohio State and Oregon, Ole Miss and LSU, Penn State and Southern Cal, Texas and Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl for the Red River Showdown there. That is the second best weekend, according to this article on NCAA.com. Number 1, no real surprise here. It goes to rivalry week number 14. You get Michigan, Ohio State. You get Oklahoma and LSU, which is now a new week 14 matchup because we've shifted things around within the conference. I still think LSU should be playing Arkansas that week, but that's besides the point. The battle for the boot. You get Texas and Texas A&M. Now, that game is not going to have, for Texas A&M, probably college football playoff implications, but it's at A&M. That is going to be a hostile environment. And if Texas slips up there, that could cost them a shot at maybe being in the 12-team playoff.
I was going to say, that's the one game that they didn't mention on rivalry week. That is probably the most underrated. I think, honestly, top 5 game I'm looking forward to this year, just because it was such a big rivalry before A&M moved over to the SEC in 12. But definitely, like, that's a huge game, because if Texas loses to Georgia or I'm trying to think who else they play this year. Obviously, they play Oklahoma.
Right.
If they slip up like twice, and that's like a game you're going into, like you're 9-2, you have to win that game, because if you lose that game, it's like you're probably not getting into the playoff.
For sure. Also, you have the Iron Bowl, which again, is Auburn going to be all that great this year? We don't know. I think they'll be solid, but like we saw last year, they had Alabama on the ropes until the miracle throw by Jalen Milroe in the waning seconds of that one. And then Notre Dame going on the road to Southern Cal. Now, look, I don't think Southern Cal is going to be all that great this year, especially in their first year in the Big Ten. Notre Dame has a very easy schedule. Notre Dame is going to go into that game because, of course, they don't have a conference championship. They don't play in the first week of December. That is their final test to see if they're good enough to be in the college football playoff. And again, they could go into that game 10-1 or something along those lines, and that could be the difference between them making it in and not. And I think, especially given the fact they don't play in a conference championship, they do have an easier schedule, they need to be somewhere around 11-1 to safely and confidently get into the 12-team playoff, because I think even 10-2 might be too dangerous for Notre Dame to be left out.
No, they definitely need to get to 11-1 or 12-0. They need to just join a conference, quite frankly. But whatever. One other week that I don't think the week in whole should get, top 5 recognition for weeks that could determine the college football playoff race. But let's not forget something interesting with week 3, the Apple Cup and Civil War. They're going on that week, so that'll be interesting. It's totally different from years past. But I do think the schedule this year, just in general, there's always going to be, like you said, like there will be cupcake games on the schedule for the most part. But I think there are weeks every week where you can look at like, okay, like there's a marquee matchup every week. Like it's not always a given. Like I think we'll at least have a few ranked matchups per week. Yeah,
certainly looking forward to it. And again, for as much as unknown going into this year with 12-team playoff, we know we're going to be treated to some very high-quality football on a week-in, week-out basis, which is certainly very, very exciting. The Olympics wrapped up last week, but a little bit of controversy surrounding the 2028 Olympics already. We'll dive into that coming up. It is The Extra Point. He is Jack Felch from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri, along with you on your Monday here on The Game, talking plenty of football, including Olympic football, which will be making its debut in the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. Of course, the Paris Olympics just wrapping up at the beginning of last week. And, there was a lot of excitement when this was announced sometime last year, I remember, and you had a lot of NFL players that immediately raised their hand and said, hey, I want to be part of that team, It'd be some kind of 7-on-7 type of thing from what I understand, so you'd be really limiting down to the best of the best. However, there already exists a U.S. national flag football team, for those that did not know, and Daryl Duchette of the U.S. national flag football team talked to Newsweek the other day about his thoughts on NFL players, volunteering themselves to be part of the future Olympic flag football team. He says, I think it's disrespectful. They automatically assume they'll be able to just join the Olympic team because of the person that they are. They didn't help grow this game to get the Olympics, give the guys who helped the game, get it to where it is, get it to where it's at, their respect. He's not wrong. I get where he's coming from. However, I don't think, and yes, flag football is a different type of football, but I still believe Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey, I still think these guys would be leaps and bounds better at flag football than these guys would be. And the point is, aren't you supposed to have the best of the best out there, right?
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard Darrell Doucette's name before this weekend?
I had not.
Okay, that's all.
Fact, I actually looked on the roster of the USA national flag football team. A couple of these guys played some college football.
Yeah.
Nobody. I mean, these aren't like, hey, this guy was formerly in the NFL and now he's on this team. Like, these are guys that work normal jobs. One of these guys lives in Charleston and, is a part of the national flag football team. So they are not average Joes per se, but they are more akin to a normal regular American citizen than an NFL athlete would be, which is cool in and of its own right. And again, these guys have done a lot in international competition to help this game get to where it can be a part of the Olympics. But again, at the end of the day, the Olympics is supposed to be about the best of the best competing.
I agree. And here's the way I look at it. It's like, we've never heard of this guy. Like the people on Twitter say, just put the fries in the bag, bro. Like, it's night and day comparison here. Like, here's the way I look at it. With the Olympics, the NFL isn't playing when the Olympics is going on. Like,
Right.
I think they'll be in training camp a little, or workouts or whatever. But it's like, for that stretch right there, you could definitely bring the best of the best into the Olympics because, again, it's flag football. It's not tackle, so it's not that big of a deal. And when you're talking about the Olympics, you need big names to attract attention. I don't think everyone's going to watch. I mean, people will watch flag football regardless, but
Right.
I don't think as many people would watch if you have these random names in there that no one's ever heard of. It's like when the United States plays, and I know the U.S. has like a tackle football team that has competed against others, and you see like China beating the U.S. by 30 points, and you're wondering why is that? And it's like you see the names that are in there, you wouldn't know any of them. So That's kind of my point. Is like not a knock on the guys that play flag football for a living and stuff, and are really good at it. And I know they have second jobs and stuff, so I get it. But at the same time, you need big names in there. You need your Patrick Mahomes, your Tyreek Hills, your players like that to go out there and play in this thing to get the notoriety and win gold at the end of the day.
And I was thinking about it from the perspective of NBC, who, of course, is the, coverage leader when it comes to the Olympics, especially here in America, who also has a deal with the NFL. I believe they're going to push pretty hard for NFL players to be a part of this because that's going to be a ratings monster. Like, we think Olympic basketball is a ratings juggernaut. You give us Olympic flag football in LA in 2028 on at 7:00 on a Tuesday night. Oh, that's going to do great numbers.
Oh yeah. And here's one solution, I guess you could, if you want to even call it a solution, just mix the rosters up with the best of the best from flag football and the best of the best from the NFL. I think that is the only way this can really work, where it's a compromise, I guess.
I saw somebody suggest that the 2028 Pro Bowl should be the best of the NFL versus the flag football team.
I agree.
And the winner goes to LA to represent the nation.
I agree. Like let's do it. That like a qualifier type thing.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be cool.
And this is what I thought in terms, because man, how do you nail down 7 players? And you'd probably have a few reserves, but still, how do you nail down those few players from the 200 some odd players, or the hundreds and hundreds of players in the NFL every single year? I think there should be a tournament within the NFL saying, okay, we're going to craft these teams on whatever criteria. You can draft them however you want to do and let them play a 16 team, 32 team, however many teams you can come up with type tournament to see who's going to represent the U.S. in the Olympics. And maybe on the other side, maybe you do something similar with U.S. flag football, where you have many tournaments and then take the 2 winners, go head to head. And guess what? The winner of that goes on to represent the country.
And here's the one thing we also need to consider with this. I think you need, if you're going to make this work from an NFL standpoint, you need the best athletes in there. So not a knock on, obviously you want Patrick Mahomes in there slinging it.
Sure.
But when you're talking about, I mean, what, in flag football, you kind of have to play 2 ways essentially.
Yeah.
How would that work with Patrick Mahomes playing 2 ways? And also, what if these guys get hurt? That's another thing we also really need to consider here is, it's like the WBC with the World Baseball Classic.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you don't see guys like, I think Edwin Diaz is a perfect example from the Mets, their closer. He got hurt in the WBC, and then he was out for the season with the Mets. So I don't think you want guys getting hurt, but I think bring the best athletes in there, like your Tyreek Hills. Travis Hunter will be in the NFL by that point, so bring him in. Maybe, I don't know, maybe like a Shadur Sanders. Guys like that where you have the best type of all-around athletes in the game, bring them into this and let them duke it out. I think it could be really good.
Absolutely. 1 hour in, 1 more hour to go. We're going to get back into what Coach Beamer had to say coming away from Saturday's scrimmage as we get closer to the start of the college football season. It is The Extra Point. He is Jack Welch from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Monday here on The Game. Tyler Head here for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Looks like we've got a pretty nice week weather-wise, but of course, as the summer rolls along, there's always going to be rain not too far away. And if you have an open crawl space under your home and recently experienced a storm, you might have some standing water under there. High humidity and condensation in your crawl space can create an environment for mold, mildew, and pests, including things like termites. That moisture can also lead to things like floor joist problems and wood rot as well. That musty smell and awful odors that come from the mold and mildew in your crawl space can also cause health issues for you and your family, like runny nose, itchy eyes, and coughs, because about half the air that you breathe in your home comes from your crawl space. So any issues with your crawl space or standing water down there, check out our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfixit.com. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanfixit.com. Welcome back in hour number 2. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Belcher from Gamecock Central along with you on this Monday. Again, 12 days away from South Carolina, kicking things off with Old Dominion to get the 2024 season officially underway. And, of course, scrimmage number 2 happened this past Saturday as we are trying to answer all the questions that we have about this team prior to that week 1 contest. And one area that's going to be a big focus this season that hasn't gotten talked about quite as much as some of these other spots is tight end. Last year, you had Trey Knox and Josh Simon come in via the transfer portal. Trey Knox, very solid, ends up, he was free agent signing in the draft. Did not get drafted, but a free agent signing, if I remember correctly. So he's gone off to the NFL. Josh Simon's back for another year, and Simon in particular, we talked about this a little bit at the end of last week. Wes and Chris made it onto Adam Rittenberg's list of sleepers in college football this year as guys that aren't, garnering a lot of headlines, but could become very solid contributors for their respective teams. And what we saw out of Simon a year ago in that number 2 spot, and when Trey Knox was injured and had to step into that number 1 spot, gives you a lot of promise for what he can do.
He's a nice option in particularly the short passing game because I think we saw a lot of times last year, specifically when Knox was down, there were a lot of nice catches he would make, like in short yardage situations that he would turn into a nice gain. He was really nice, though, in the red zone, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, last year, he only had 2 receiving touchdowns, but he averages 9.1 yards per catch, and his longest catch last year was 33 yards. And his production, I think, can really go up this year because I'm assuming he'll be the number 1 tight end. And then you have Brady Hunt behind him, and then Michael Smith as a nice option who I think could definitely play in this offense this year if given an opportunity. But Josh Simon is the guy this year, and I think he's really going to have a nice season.
Let's hear a little bit of what Coach Beamer had to say in regards to the tight ends. Let's go with cut number 14 here. Ed, this is him talking about the tight ends as well as their options for personnel this year. All right, 1 second. We'll get to that in just a second. But again, as you just mentioned, you kind of ran through the names there. You had Josh Simon as the assumed number 1. We assume that Brady Hunt's going to be the number 2. And then Michael Smith, for everything that we've heard, as well as the small clips we've gotten to see from practices and from the scrimmages and stuff, certainly looks the part as a true freshman that could push for some playing time. Now, I say that, and you got to take it with a grain of salt because there's inevitably always going to be that one guy through fall camp, through the scrimmages that gets talked about a lot that we don't see actually take the field. I don't know if the Michael Smith's that guy, but again, everything that we've heard up to this point has been good.
I don't know. I think I like this. I would like to see him play this year. I think he definitely can. I do think an injury or something would probably have to happen to where it's like he would get more time on the field. I mean, I don't know. We'll definitely probably see him in the Old Dominion game, Akron, right? I mean, I don't know, but I think if there is a chance where you could definitely redshirt him and these other guys are playing as well as we think they can, and there's not really a use for him right now, great. You get him for 3 to 4 more years potentially. But I do think tight end wise, they are going to be in good position. And
we got that ready to go this time, Ed? All right, let's give it another shot. Cut number 14. This is Coach Beamer talking about tight ends and personnel as it pertains to how they line up on offense.
Yeah, tight end wise, yes. I wish that Reed McKeska and Nick Elksness had been healthy today and able to practice, because when we talk about was that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys out, that's 2 tight ends. So the majority of the guys that got work today were Josh and Brady and Michael and Maurice Moe, and Connor Cox as well, and Lucas Vose, who's one of our tight ends also. So we'll I do, for sure, to answer your question in regards to having 2 tight ends on the field at one time. Absolutely. Brady's been great. Josh has been great. Mike's been really good as a true freshman. There's one of your true freshmen, Hale. Mo Brown will be, as I talked about last week, is going to help us there. So I think we can do some things with those guys and allow us to do some things in the run game and pass game both, because they're not just your big prototypical tight ends. They're just big guys that can block. They can help us in the pass game as well.
So one name that he threw in there that we haven't spent any time talking about, but has gotten a lot of attention. What can you tell us about Maurice Brown?
So the thing with Maurice Brown is, and he actually spoke to the media last week because, keep in mind, almost 2 weeks ago now, Shane Beamer did mention Maurice Brown, name dropped him literally as a potential name to keep an eye on that will see a lot of playing time this year. He didn't say could. He said will see a lot of playing time this year. So his story's interesting. He came from, I think, Army Prep at West Point 2 years ago, and then came to South Carolina last year as a walk-on, saw action in all 12 games on special teams, and he's a big tight end. I mean, he came into the press conference setting, his shirt cropped up, big abs, the whole ordeal. He's a big dude, man. I think he's a guy that's getting slept on now. Will he play a ton this year at tight end? I'm not sure. But a lot of guys have spoken highly of him as a guy that is a dog. He can definitely do whatever's asked of him. And when I think Juju McDowell spoke specifically on him last week, when he gets into practice, just a switch flips, and he's a different guy out there. So he's someone that could definitely be a nice option out there. I was looking back at his high school stats. He had 18 catches as a senior. 11 of them were for touchdowns. So I know it's high school versus college here, but I mean, it just shows an example of the real last time he played tight end in games. He's productive. And so if you need him maybe in a short yardage goal line situation and some guys maybe are down or whatever the case might be, he's a nice option to have.
Absolutely. And again, that room as a whole, pretty full and pretty solid overall. And again, we assume that Josh Simon's going to be number one, Brady Hunt number two, but that mix of who could maybe get some playing time behind them is certainly going to be interesting. As you mentioned, you got Elkson, got Connor Cox, Reed McKeskey, these other names that certainly, are going to factor into that as well. But again, knock on wood, everybody stays healthy, that hopefully you have a lot of good options there as the season rolls along. Yeah,
definitely. And I think the big thing is this year, health, and specifically at tight end. We talk about depth being the buzzword this year, right? And tight end is no exception to that. I mean, you really do have, in my opinion, 4 to 5 guys who you could really go out there and count on and be productive at tight end. But obviously the goal is with a 2 tight end set this year, probably, you're running out there with Brady Hunt and Josh Simon consistently, and they are your guys making plays. And it's not just going to be, I know Shane's referenced this, it's not going to be just the tight ends blocking this year. Every year since he has been at South Carolina, a tight end has been, I believe, in the top 5 of team receptions every year. You go back to Nick Muse, you go back to Trey Knox and Josh Simon last year, and I'm forgetting someone from 2022. But
Stogner?
I don't think so. Jaheim Bell.
Oh,
that's who it was. Yeah. But shout out Austin Stogner. But they've always had a good pass catching tight end. I don't think they've had the elite one yet. Can Josh Simon or Brady Hunt be that mix of a true top tight end in the SEC? I think it's to be determined, but I think they're definitely going to get their share of catches this year, and what they do from there is up to them.
Let's switch over to the wide receiver spot now. Something that was a big factor in scrimmage number 1 was guys dropping passes, which, again, is going to be a big problem if that continues. Cut number 9 here, Ed. This is Coach Beamer talking about if those issues were alleviated this past Saturday.
We had fewer. Did we have some? Yes. When you have 100-plus plays, you're going to have some drops, and we did. Some of those that there isn't an excuse for because they should have been caught. But at the same time, we've worked really hard at that. We've spent more time this week on just, not elementary like catching drills and catching the ball, but just more time in walkthroughs, just working on a catch circuit where everybody on the offense just going around and just catching more passes in practice and in walkthroughs. And it's paid off as well. Thought they did some good things, and all of them, I think, flashed at times, and all of them certainly had some moments they would like to have back, but pleased with it, and now we really got to get, and it'll be better for them too, Jordan, as we've thrown the whole offense at them, the last offense and defense, the last 2 weeks of practice. I mean, everything that we do, we've thrown at them. So now we start to get into game planning and having a smaller game plan of plays and things that they have to know each week will to continue to eliminate the clutter in their head and allow them to play faster.
So it sounds like that's improving, which is obviously good. And I would imagine when, again, you have so many options at the wide receiver spot, rotating guys in and out, getting that chemistry down with Lenore Sellers and guys that he really, outside of Harbor and Russell, wasn't throwing to last year. I imagine that does take a little bit of work, and drops are something that are probably just part of the process.
Oh, it definitely is. And look, I think it's something to keep an eye on, but I don't think it's something to where, like, I'm hitting the panic button right now. Like, oh my gosh, these receivers can't catch anything. They're going to have their plays this year. I mean, they had some decent catches, nice catches this weekend from what we heard. And I definitely think it takes time. You're going to have drops. That is par for the course. But as the year goes on, you try to minimize them as much as possible. And once guys get into a rhythm in real game and the adrenaline's rushing through them and stuff, once you make one big catch, it's like I think the rest will kind of follow.
One name that has gotten a lot of attention through camp so far seems to be, we now call him Dre Jacobs, not Vendrivius Jacobs, but Dre Jacobs, who transfers over from Florida State, was a highly touted guy, come out of high school, didn't really play a whole lot last year, but with this room being wide open, certainly is in the mix to get some playing time this year. As he kind of falls in line with a lot of these other guys in terms of body type and skill set and all that kind of stuff, where you kind of have, 3, 4, 5 guys kind of do a lot of the same things?
Yeah, with Jacobs specifically, I mean, he's a name that has continued to get brought up. And the same thing with Nick Harbor and Dale Von Campbell, because Shane mentioned them all by name. A question I asked, and they all missed the spring. And, 2 of them just transferred in after that, and they've caught up and been playing really well. I think with the receivers right now, if I had to guess what the rotation might look like, Jared Brown's going to be a name in there for sure.
Right.
I think you're going to see Dre Jacobs in there, most definitely. Look for a guy like Gage Larvadain to be in there as well, maybe. And, I think the Dale Von Campbells and Nick Harbors can definitely be a nice factor, like we've said multiple times, in the long pass game when you need a jump ball to go get. And I think whoever they do throw out there, I still feel like it's up for debate. Because, again, you can also throw a guy like Mazeo Bennett in there, too, in the slot maybe. They have a lot of options, and I think whoever they do throw out there, as long as it's a good mix of guys with height, size, speed, all the different attributes to where it's not the 4 same guys going out there. It's guys with different skill sets. I think it can play really well for what whoever's at quarterback is able to do this year.
See what happens in 12 days. And again, I think probably about a week from today, we should get our depth chart on who's going to be starting where going into the Old Dominion game. So we'll see what happens with that. On The Athletic last week, Manny Navarro put out his annual list of the oddly specific predictions for the top 25 teams in the preseason AP Top 25. We'll dive into some of those coming up. It is the Extra Point. He's Jack Belcher from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, along with you on this Monday here on the game. Reminder, coming up the end of the week, it's our annual Summer Golf Classic at Charlwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Still some spots available. By the way, weather's going to be absolutely beautiful. So if you want to sign up your foursome, give Charlwood a call at 803-755-2000 while the spots are still available for later on this week. Certainly looking forward to being out there and also giving away our Ultimate Season Ticket 2.0 grand prize to one of our three finalists that was announced a little bit earlier on this morning on the early game. Jack, do you have any bold predictions for the college football season? Anything that's just crazy out there that people may look at you funny for saying?
As a whole or just with South Carolina?
Anything.
Oh, man. Put me on the spot there. You know, if I had to say, I do feel like from the group of five, I guess group of five, right? Mm-hmm. I would say keep an eye on teams like Boise State, Tulane, teams like that. I don't know. It's to make the playoff. I don't know. That's a tough prediction.
So Manny Navarro of The Athletic every single year puts out what he calls his oddly specific predictions for every top 25 team, which is taking the AP top 25 and making predictions team by team here. And just so you think he's not some schmo that's making random predictions, because there's a lot of those out there, here's some things that he got right last year. He said, last year, I told you the ACC would get left out of the playoff, and they did. Duke would upset Clemson in the opener, and they did. He predicted that Michigan's running back duo of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards would combine for 32 touchdowns on their way to the Wolverines going to the college football playoff, which is exactly what they did. He said Texas would win the Big 12, that Washington would win the Pac-12, and that Michael Penix Jr. would beat Oregon twice on his way to the Heisman Trophy ceremony. So this guy's actually got some things that he nailed down last year.
Those are definitely specific, and hey, give him credit, man. I don't know how he thought of some of those, but hey, it's very impressive. But I feel like Duke beating Clemson was it might have been a given. But
so we're not going to go through all these because it's the entire top 25 that he has in here. But I picked out a couple that are very interesting to me. We'll start off with this. There will be no undefeated teams in college football.
I agree.
That even Georgia and Ohio State, who are the top two in the AP poll, favorites to go to the national championship and all that kind of stuff, with their schedules, even they will not be able to get through the season unscathed.
You might get a team or two that goes undefeated, actually, the more I think about it. I think Oregon is a team to keep an eye on. You know, if they beat Ohio State and they beat Washington, and I think they go to the Big House too. I think if you beat those three teams, I feel like you're on a good path to making the going 12-0, and you also have Boise State early in the season, but it's at home, so
sure,
that's good. Another team maybe to keep an eye on. I don't know, honestly. I mean, Georgia potentially. If again, their schedule is tough too, to where it's like if they beat Texas and Bama, the path is there,
and they got Ole Miss,
Yeah. So I definitely think there are a few teams that can do it. But again, it's really going to come down to those big games where it's like, okay, can you beat them? And the benefit for Oregon specifically is that I believe you get Ohio State at home, you get them in Eugene, like we talked about earlier, and then I think you go to Washington, so you go to Seattle. So I think you win those games there, and it's like you can definitely do it. But going to the Big House, that will be tough.
Yeah, and here's the thing with like an Ohio State and an Oregon, they could theoretically play each other 3 times. So they could play in the regular season. They can meet again in the Big Ten championship game, and then it probably wouldn't be a first-round matchup, but they could possibly rematch in like the quarterfinals or the semifinals in the college football playoff. So these, just because you beat a team once does not mean you're not going to see them again. And again, there's a lot of plausible scenarios, Georgia and Texas, Georgia and Alabama, things like that, where you could see teams face each other maybe up to 3 times in one season.
It's very, very possible. We've seen it before twice with LSU and Alabama playing the game of the century in 2011, and then later that year playing for the national championship. And then you get obviously Georgia and Bama playing multiple times in the same season. So it's definitely possible. But 3 times would feel like a lot. But with the way the playoff is now, it lends itself well towards that potentially happening.
Going down to another one a little bit lower on his list, he is predicting for Notre Dame to go 11-1 and be the 5th seed in the college football playoffs, so the highest ranked non-champion being Notre Dame. Now, I would assume if we're going to put Notre Dame at 11-1, that loss is going to have to come to a very good team, and that it would be a what we like to call a quality loss, which he has here, them losing to Texas A&M in week number 1, which, but like, if you can ever lose a game, especially to a good opponent, week number 1 is probably the best one to do it in because you have the rest of the season to run the table. And if you're on an 11-game win streak, you're kind of hard to deny at that point in time. My thing with Notre Dame, and I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, the rest of their schedule is very, very weak.
I agree. Their schedule is very weak for sure. However, I will say, I'm thinking about making a prediction here that I'll share in a sec. They do have 3 road games from October 19th on. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, 4. But 3 of them specifically could be, trap games necessarily. They play Georgia Tech in Atlanta, October 19th. And then they get the 2 of the 3 military schools. They go to Navy. That's a noon kickoff. And then they go to Army, West Point, for a 7 o'clock game the week before USC. I'm going to call it right now, and I don't know how. It might be totally wrong.
Yeah.
Just because Army's coming off a 6-6 season. I'm taking Army to win that game. Like, right before USC. I think that might happen.
Here's the thing for me. Their month of November does step up significantly. They have Florida State, and they close the season with Southern Cal. Now, look, I don't think Southern Cal is going to be a ranked team at that point in time, so that looks tougher than it is than I think it's going to be. Game. But it's always a tough game. It's a rivalry, and Notre Dame got the better of them, a season ago. I think the fact that you're playing Army, which you may beat Army, but playing an option team twice late in the season, what that's going to do to you physically,
it's going to be,
especially before you. Okay, so here's the thing: you play Army in New York, like you said, at Yankee Stadium. Funny enough, that's going to be a physical brawl of a game. Then you fly all the way across the country to play Southern Cal a week later, and that's a high flying, put up a lot of points offensive team. I don't like that combination.
Just bookend it right now. They're going to end up having 2 to 3 losses on that schedule, and I don't think they're getting into the playoff if that's the case.
Yeah. Now they're bringing Riley Leonard from Duke. Solid
great.
Quarterback, had his knee injury a year ago and all that kind of stuff, and the offense should be fine. I'm interested to see how Marcus Freeman fares in year number 3 because there's a lot of belief in him. They took a good step forward, a season ago. But is he the guy? Like, is he the guy that can get to that Chip or Brian Kelly level of being in the national championship conversation every handful of years? We'll see.
We'll have to see. I mean, look, if this were the 14 playoff, it'd be a lot harder for them to get in. But I do think because it is 12 teams, it's a much easier thing now. I think that first game of the year in College Station, that will go a long way to determining what this season does look like for them. Because, I mean, if they lose that game right out of the gate, it's a tough blow against a team that has a new coach and stuff. But if they go into College Station and win, think about the ramifications for what that can do for confidence. Like, you went into one of the most hostile environments in college football. You beat an SEC team, and then you get, Northern Illinois, you go to Purdue, Miami, Ohio. Once you close out the month of September, it's like if you're 4-0 going into that Louisville game, you could really set the tone for the rest of the year and kind of take off from there. And like we said, they do play Army and Navy, so 2 option teams. That's going to be mentally and physically taxing with the amount of times they're going to run the ball. But I do think there is a scenario where they can make the playoff. It's just you got to get off to a good start, in my opinion. But there is also a scenario where they could potentially lose 2 to 3 games.
Right. We'll get to some more of these predictions, including some big-name teams that Manny Navarro does not think will be in the college football playoff. We'll hit that coming up. It is The Extra Point. He's Jack Belcher from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler, Jack Beltry along with you on your Monday morning here on the Game. Making our way through Manny Navarro of the Athletics' oddly specific predictions for college football in 2024. And again, he's made some pretty accurate predictions here in the past couple years. So some of these things could end up coming to fruition. Now getting to the real juicy ones here. He's predicting that Ole Miss will not make the college football playoff. Let me read you his little expert here. It says, Texas A&M transfer Walter Nolan and Florida State transfer Princely U will be a terror to deal with on the defensive line. They're why the Rebels will lead the SEC in sacks. But there's just something about the other side of the line of scrimmage, losing Quinshon Judkins, that makes me squeamish. For offensive linemen, Lane Kiffin pulled in via the portal weren't necessarily highly graded in Pro Football Focus. I expect Jackson Dart to be very good. But when push comes to shove, offensive line cohesion, he's predicting 35 sacks allowed, will cost the Rebels a spot in the college football playoff. Now, let's think about this from the context of what Ole Miss has done this offseason. As he mentioned, all those guys out of the transfer portal, they went big game hunting, and they brought in a lot of high-caliber talent. They're in win-now mode. As I've said, they are like a team making moves at the trade deadline in baseball, where it's like, all right, we're going all in to win the World Series this year. Who cares what happens after that? We want to walk away with it this year. That's exactly what Ole Miss did in the offseason. If they don't even make the college football playoff, I can't imagine what the scene in Oxford's going to be like.
There is a good chance they can make it. I mean, look, they have such an easy non-conference schedule where it's like they'll be 4-0 going into SEC play. However, I mean, there is a real possibility like they don't make the playoff. Like, here's the SEC schedule. I mean, you got Kentucky at home. Then you start off October with, in my opinion at least, and I think many South Carolina fans here, very two brutal games to start off. You go to Carolina on October 5th. That game's going to be, if that's a night game, and if Juice Wells is playing, or even if he's not, it's going to be an electric atmosphere. Should be, I think that's a game that you can, I don't want to say bank on, but definitely put some money on South Carolina upsetting right there. And then you go to to LSU the week after. That is a very tough place to go play, as we know. And if that's a night game too, have fun with that. Later in the year, they get Georgia at home. That's great. But Georgia is Georgia, and they don't lose many games. And I know they're going to Oxford, but Georgia is such a good team at that point of the year. They should be firing on all cylinders. And then you get a trip to Gainesville the week before the Egg Bowl. So, I mean, it's not a lock that they're making the playoffs. Just because you added so many guys doesn't mean it's going to work. Like, just because you added Juice Wells doesn't mean he's going to be healthy. Like, just because you added so-and-so does not guarantee you. You can be the best football team on paper, but how it translates over to the game is a completely different tale.
For them to miss the playoffs, they would have to be at least 9-3.
Agree.
Because I think if you're 10-2 with this schedule, assuming your losses aren't coming to Georgia Southern and Furman, then you should be in. But let's say they lose to Georgia. Let's say they lose to Oklahoma, and let's say they lose to LSU, the three ranked teams currently on their schedule. That would probably be enough to keep them out. But again, if you beat one of any of those teams and run the table the rest of the way, I think you're probably in good shape. I would think.
I would say so. I think if you're 10-2 or better, you're probably in. Now, if you're 9-3, I would have to assume you probably lose. I mean, if you lose to South Carolina and South Carolina is under 500 this season and they don't have a great year, that detracts from what they have, regardless of what they do.
Now, let's go this scenario here. Let's say they did lose to South Carolina. Let's say they did lose to LSU and lose to Oklahoma. But what if they beat Georgia as like the number one team? And could you keep them out at that point? And that's what we don't know about all this, right? That's where the debate comes from.
Here's the thing, though. If by that point in the season Georgia's still number one in the country and you beat them, then it's like, okay, totally deserve to have some say or thought process on like, hey, like they deserve to be in the playoff potentially. But again, it's like if you lose 3 games and there are other teams around the country, there's gonna be a lot of teams around the country that have a loss or two on their schedule. But if there's 12 teams ahead of them that maybe have 1 or 2 losses and they're pretty good, it's gonna be tough it's going to be tough to put them in, especially at 3 losses. But again, I mean, it's possible. It's just you don't want to drop a game that you're not supposed to. Like Carolina is one example, but what if they go to Arkansas and lose a game? You know, what if they go to Wake and lose that game? You know, there's a lot of different scenarios where it's like, you know, Ole Miss is supposed to be really good this year, but what if they're just not living up to the hype? What does that do?
So here's another team that Manny Navarro of The Athletics is predicting will not make the college football playoff. He says a 10-win Penn State team will get left out. You know, we've said so much this offseason that I feel like the 12-team playoff is tailor-made for Penn State because they were a team that has not been able to get over the Michigan and Ohio State hump for the better part of the past decade. And by having an expanded playoff, you could still not win those games and still make it in. However, when you look at their schedule this year, they do play Ohio State. They play at Southern Cal. They play at Wisconsin. Other than that, pretty light cakewalk. West Virginia in the non-con, which they had a better year last year than people thought they were going to. Bowling Green, Kent State, Illinois, UCLA, Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, Maryland. It's a pretty light resume.
They do go to Morgantown to start the year, so that could be tough. And you know, I think the resume is like, if they were to lose a game or two, it's like, I don't know. This playoff is tailor-made for them, like you said. But, I mean, if they get wins, I mean, they got Ohio State at home. That's probably going to be the whiteout this year, I would have to guess. You don't have Michigan on the schedule. You don't have Michigan State surprisingly on the schedule because that's normally who they play at the end of the year. But I think there are enough games on the schedule where as long as you don't lose, like, 2 to 3 games, you can definitely get in. I mean, you're going to Southern Cal mid-year. Who knows what that's going to be? You're playing Washington, Ohio State, like I said. And outside of that, though, it's not really exactly the best resume type of schedule, but it's an easy one to where it's like, okay, you should be able to win these games.
And I wonder how much of a step up Drew Aller can make this season. He's somebody that last year could not throw the ball downfield to save his life, it seemed like. And again, if you're going to beat the Ohio States, if you're going to beat, you know, if you theoretically found yourself playing in Oregon or something like that, like you can't beat those type of teams without being dynamic enough on offense to have big plays.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not super confident and high on Drew Aller. I think he's a fine quarterback, but I think there's so many better ones, especially in the Big Ten. And then as for the rest of the team, I'm not sure how it's going to look. Obviously, they've always seemingly been good, regardless. Like James Franklin, give him credit. Most times he gets the most out of those guys. However, it's like the most is not good enough when it comes to playing against Ohio State and Michigan every year. They're kind of like it's kind of like when Michigan was not able to beat Ohio State every single year in the first few years of the Jim Harbaugh era, and then they had the game. What was it, like 2-3 years ago, where they finally got over that hump? So it's kind of like that for me, where it's like year after year, you cannot beat these teams. At some point, I feel like something's got to give, and I think one of these years they're going to catch them and beat the Ohio States of the world, the now maybe the Oregons or Michigans, whoever it might be. I don't see it happening this year. I think they will probably be on the outside looking in. But, again, they're still going to be in the hunt, I think.
One more prediction here. This one is that Clemson, for the second straight year, will be a sub-500 team. That has not happened since 2009 and 2010, which is right at the very beginning of the Dabo Swinney era. And he puts this a lot on the issues with the offensive line. He thinks Cade Klubnik is still going to take a step up in the second year as a starter. But as a whole, this team not going to be quite good enough to get to that 10-win mark again, which again would mean they're not in the college football playoff once again.
I don't know. I think most know better than to doubt Clemson. I mean, they always seem to find a way to just turn it on. And I do think this year there are 3 potential games they lose. I think they're going to lose to Georgia. I think they are going to lose to NC State. And I think they could definitely go out there and lose to Florida State. However, rest of the schedule really bodes well to where they can get to 9 wins, I think. You do have South Carolina coming to Clemson at the end of the year, so who knows with that. But I do think, for the most part, the schedule is very good for the Tigers. And, I mean, if they get to 9 wins at the end of the year, I mean, I think they can get to 10 with the bowl win. But for regular season standards, I don't know if they get to 10, but never really count them out, in my opinion.
Yeah, and especially in an expanded playoff. Again, we know there's a lot of unrest based on what happened last year, which was a pretty sizable step back from where Clemson had been for pretty much a decade, with the dominance of Dabo Swinney's crew. If they missed a 12-team playoff, I'm very interested to see what the conversations coming away from this season would be if they were once again on the outside looking in.
Yeah, and especially if they take a bigger step back than we think. Like, if they end up being if they just lay an egg this year and go 7-5 or 6-6, I think the conversation really starts to heat up. Not about putting Dabo, in a hot seat situation or even firing him. I think more so just in terms of hey man, when are you going to start using the transfer portal to your advantage? Because it's
right.
Think about how much unlocked potential Clemson has right now without the portal. They have not fully dove into it, in my opinion. They've relied on a lot of high school recruiting and maybe getting a guy or two from the portal. But for the most part, it's there's a lot left to be desired. And I think Dabo, if he uses that to his advantage, maybe bring in some guys that can help him, assistant coaches that can get the whole portal thing figured out along with him. I mean, they could be so much better than they really are right now. That's the thing, especially in a conference like the ACC, where, I mean, who knows how Florida State looks? DJ. I mean, how DJU? How's he going to look this year?
Right.
How's that team going to look? How's NC State going to look? And all these other teams coming into the fold. It really could be Clemson's, division or conference year after year, but I feel like it's just not right now.
We'll certainly see what happens. We'll come back. We'll wrap up today's edition of The Extra Point. Talk a little NFL preseason as we are getting close to the start of pro football as well and learning about some quarterbacks around the league. That's coming up. It is The Extra Point. He is Jack Belcher from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head here on The Game.
Mahomes keeps it, goes behind the back. Kelsey's got it for the first down. How do you like that?
Well, they talked about it in practice this week, and Mahomes even talked about the fact that he said Andy wants him to do it in a game. Well, guess what? Here it is.
Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Belcher, along with you for a few more minutes before we jump into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. That was the call over the weekend as Patrick Mahomes does, I guess, one of the few things we haven't seen him do in his NFL career, throw one behind the back to Travis Kelce in their preseason game over the weekend, which, again, this was, I think he played a little bit in the first game. Obviously, starters getting a little bit more run in the second game, and probably won't see him in the third game. But as if you couldn't be more impressed with Patrick Mahomes. And look, this is an exhibition game. Even if it got intercepted, it's not that big of a deal. But doing behind the back pass, that is bold.
It's only Patrick Mahomes could do that. It's remarkable the way and the pizzazz he has on the field. The aura, I think, is the word I'm looking for here. Just what he does out there is absolutely ridiculous. But behind the back pass, that is something you can whip out in a preseason game. I would not be shocked if later in the year, it's like if the Chiefs are up by like 20 points or whatever in the fourth quarter and he's still in. Do it. I mean, it's like he's the only one I feel like that could do it.
This is one of those things, and I posed this question a couple weeks back, that could the Chiefs ever get to like the Patriots level of hate in the NFL? And while that is a very high bar to try and get to, if they started mixing in like Harlem Globetrotter antics, especially if they're up big in a game, I feel like that could raise the hate level on a lot of people.
Oh, totally. And people are going to look at it like showboating and just doing too much when you're already up by a lot. And I totally get that side of it, but it's like, I mean, we're seeing stuff that we've never seen before. And it's, I'll be the first one to tell you, like, I do not like the Chiefs. But, like, you can't help but be amazed at that type of play. Like, seeing it is just crazy. And the defender in his face on the play just had no idea what was going on there. It's something we just don't see.
Who expects that?
No one.
Who thinks that you're going to try throwing a football behind your back? Like try running and
in a game,
accurately throwing a football behind your back and tell me how well that goes, because that's what he did. And again, we know he's a freak of nature when it comes to so many other elements of being a quarterback, but to be able to do that, the throw was kind of low, but Kelce still was able to pick it up and get a few yards of it. I think he got a first down out of it too. It's just, it's insane, right?
It's wild. It's something that when I saw it, I was just sitting there like, there's no way this guy actually did it in a game. But he's done stuff like that before where he makes these sidearm throws.
I know.
He does the jump passes. This guy, when it's all said and done, I don't know how many rings he'll have. I think eventually he'll slow down a little bit, kind of like how Tom Brady went for like a 10-year stretch without a Super Bowl ring. But I think when it's all said and done, there's a real argument to be made, and this is something we can talk about years down the road, him being one of the GOATs in the NFL.
Elsewhere in the NFL, as far as quarterbacks go, Caleb Williams continuing to impress out there in Chicago. I'm sure you saw the highlight of his Mahomes-esque scramble for a touchdown that people are going nuts about. You always take preseason stuff with a grain of salt. He certainly looked the part in moments like that. We'll see what happens once we get in the actual games. They play in a tough division. I think he can be very solid, but I see a lot of people that are getting maybe a little too excited about him right now.
Yeah, and on that play he had, I mean, it's just the excitement Chicago has for this dude is through the roof. And I feel like it's different from Justin Fields, who I know we'll talk about here in a second. But with Fields, it's like you saw at the end of last year, the fans really bought into him. Mm-hmm. But now it's like from the jump, they are all in on Caleb Williams, and he's going to be the guy for them this year. I would imagine he'll have some struggles, and especially you bring up the point, he's in a tough division in the NFC North. But I feel like the Bears, they went out, and credit to Ryan Poles and that staff there, they went out and got him weapons. They got him Keenan Allen. They signed DJ Moore long-term.
Yep.
they're going to be
drafted Roma Dunze.
Exactly. They are going to be a force, I think, this year. And even if Caleb Williams isn't at his best every week, as long as he's having like a decent enough year, these receivers will go out there and make catches on plays that maybe would have been picks otherwise because they are just that good.
And lastly, the ongoing debate between Justin Fields and Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh rolls on. They've had a disastrous preseason for the most part. Their offense has mustered 9 points in the past 2 games. Between those two guys starting, offensive line's having issues. Russell Wilson got sacked 3 times over the weekend in his preseason game. I mean, I guess you give Russell Wilson the benefit of the doubt, but I don't know if we've seen enough from either one of these guys to say who definitively should be the starter or not.
I don't know who's going to be the starter, man. It's way too tough to say right now, and it shouldn't be the case. Russell Wilson is just not the player he was when he was with the Seahawks, but with Justin Fields, the benefit he has is that he looks pretty decent as a passer, but he's also very mobile and can run for a ton of yards. So if it were up to me, maybe go with Fields in that case. But again, you're paying Russell Wilson a lot of money, I think, to come and play here. So you might as well play him if you have him.
That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. We'll see you later on in the week, Jack.